Too Much Information is a production of iHeart. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Too Much Information, the show that brings you the secret histories and little-known facts behind your favorite movies, music, TV shows, and more. We are your fedora-wearing friends of factoids, your chairman of the board, as in, I'm bored, let's listen to TMI. Regrets, we have a few, including that last joke, which worked a lot better on paper. My name is Jordan Runtagh.
And I'm Alex Heigl.
And today we are talking about one of the most enduring songs of the last half-century, a song that's been embraced as a stirring anthem of defiant individualism, or a hymn to self-delusion and self-aggrandizement, depending on which side you're on. We are talking about My Way, made famous by Old Blue Eyes himself, Hoboken's very own Francis Albert Sinatra. Its self-reflective lyrics were written especially for Sinatra on the eve of his retirement at the request of his friend, a young pup by the name of Paul Anka, who was just 26 years old when he wrote the words to a pre-existing French pop tune. Now, folks, I'm going to veer into what may seem like a shameless plug for a moment, but bear with me. I swear it's not intended to be. One of my new projects my friends at iHeart had me working on is a talk show hosted by Paul Anka, appropriately titled Our Way. Working on this show has led me to become pretty friendly with Paul, and he's been very generous in sharing his memories of Frank and what it was like writing these lyrics for his friend and idol. I was just so fascinated by the story, and when I realized that this spring was the 55th anniversary of the song, I figured it was as good an excuse as any to dive in.
Oh, does that mean it can sign up for AARP?
No, that's 65.
Oh, okay.
Trust me, if there's anyone under 40 who knows these rules, it's me. Heigl, what are your thoughts on this song or Sinatra?
Oh, I mean, I'm Italian. Like, I can't say a bad word about Frankie on air.
On air, yeah.
He's hilarious. He's like one of the greatest Napoleon complexes in music.
I don't even know if he's small. He might be his Napoleon complex is so strong that it transcends his height.
Yeah, I mean, I know he was like really real thin. I mean, in my college house, we had a picture of his mugshot up on the wall, which I realize is probably a problem.
Is it cliche?
Well, it's a cliche, but it's also a problem because wasn't that for when he got picked up for statch rape?
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I assumed it was like for like driving a golf cart through a window or something, which we'll touch on.
No, but we'll get to that. No, I don't know. I mean, I fall into the sort of middle-aged white, in olden days, what they would call a hipster listening habits of Frank, which means I like stuff like all the Nelson Riddle stuff, Wee Small Hours, and then some of the weirder stuff with like when we had like electric bass on the records. Watertown, that's
Watertown? Yeah, that's in here. We're gonna talk about that. His weird concept album that nobody bought. It sold 30,000 copies at a time when stuff wasn't selling 30,000 copies.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, he's great. He's also hilarious and embarrassing in the way that so many prominent Italians are. Like your Andrew Cuomo's.
Like our family.
Yeah, your Andrew Cuomo's. So, yeah, I don't know. He's Frank. What are you going to say about Frankie?
He's Frank. Yeah. I mean, I kind of took Sinatra for granted, as is the case with so many musical touchstones that we're born knowing. He's just sort of become part of the architecture. Obviously, everyone talks about the brilliance of his phrasing. I think it was Charlton Heston who said that every song he sings is a 4-minute movie. You had something to say about his phrasing earlier, which I wasn't aware of.
Oh, well, I mean, so Sinatra in he's really interesting because crooning as a singing genre really kind of had just come into form because, prior it was like shouting, like you had to be heard over a big band.
Like Caruso, yeah.
Caruso, or I'm thinking of the Jump Blues, okay. There's 4 Big Joe Williams, but these guys who would come in and you could hear them singing from the back of a bar. And so consequently, even your guys like Cab Calloway, once they started having access to good studio technology, they were still kind of in that vein. But because Sinatra bridged that, he was able to really bring all this depth and nuance into, this storytelling aspect into his vocal performances because he wasn't singing to the rafters. He wasn't trying to force his body to put out as much sound as possible. But he got all that phrasing, admittedly, from Billie Holiday, who, obviously did not live long enough to profit off of it or, as this story is told time and time again, white guy took something from a black lady and took it further to the bank than she did. But But, he's like such a big influence on people that it's easy to understand how like guys like Jim Morrison would have picked up his vocal phrasing having heard Frank before Billie Holiday, So I don't know if I can really begrudge him that, but I think he's fascinating because of that,
I mean, just to explicitly state, crooning really became an art form because of just the technological advancement of microphones.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, really.
Yeah.
And then you think about, it's like illustrating the difference between like Bessie Smith or like one of those people who's like 45s, like even they're old, like, or 30, they're really old, like Depression era ones sound like they're, it's so blown out. And then you're like, holy shit, I can sing soft into this thing. You can hear my lip sounds.
You can hear the breathing. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that.
It was my favorite moment of that is on that Rod Stewart record. The first two just have mistakes all over them. Not Gasoline Alley, but the two he made with the Faces crew. And there's one, I think it's
Every Picture.
Yeah, where he just like audibly like tries to come in a bar early, and you just hear him go,
yeah,
and then like back off the mic real quick. So it is just, it's really funny when you think about the way that singing evolved to catch up to the technology rather than the other way around.
Yeah. And the other thing that I didn't really think about until researching this episode, and you hear people say this, how I kind of took a dim view of Sinatra and people of his ilk because I'm a Beatles guy and a Bob Dylan guy and a singer-songwriter guy. And so anyone who didn't write their own material, I was just kind of like, well, there was a certain level of respect I felt like I couldn't achieve for him. But you hear all these people claiming that Sinatra invented the concept album. That's the phrase you always hear.
Sure.
And there really is some truth to that because he was the first to use the LP as a medium. Even if he didn't write the songs himself, he would choose every track himself and work with the arranger very closely, or in some cases work with the songwriters personally to kind of impart whatever mood he wanted. And so he would create these albums that were an entire mood. I appreciate the way that he would sing too. He would stand in the middle of an orchestra, no headphones or anything, and just like be part of the music. I love that.
Yeah, and went deaf.
Did he?
I assume that's really bad for you.
Oh, yeah. Well, back to My Way. For me, there are two distinct ways to look at My Way. The first is a lyrical autobiography or a sort of musical mission statement of a very singular man, Frank Sinatra. It was one of the 11 songs he sang at his famous 1971 retirement concert, a show that was meant to wrap up his public life. The retirement lasted 2 years, but let's not talk about that. My Way was intended to be a swan song for a career that endured for a then impressive 3 decades, from Bobby Soxers to the Beatles and beyond. And there were many times when Frank was counted out. But like the former boxer that he was, he kept getting back up. And this song's a summation of his rich life, sung by a guy who'd truly seen it all. And only he could summon the prerequisite swagger to pull off lines like, "The record shows I took the blows and did it my way."
I forgot he was also like basically the first guy to start an artist-owned record label too. You can't sell him short for that.
Oh, Reprise, yeah. Let the record show. Frank always knew how to make a buck. And was very quick to act when he realized that someone was taking a buck from him.
Unless they were the mafia.
Yes. So My Way, one way of looking at it is as a musical biography or autobiography of Frank Sinatra himself. But to me, the song's endured because of what it's done for regular people. Singing My Way is like the musical equivalent of wearing a Superman cape or a fine tuxedo. Take your pick. The real theme of My Way is that every life is a triumph, not just Frank Sinatra's. That's why it regularly tops karaoke charts around the world, and it's also the most popular song to be requested at funerals. It's the center point of a Venn diagram between Trump's inaugural ball and the funeral for murdered rapper Nipsey Hussle. It's arguably the only thing those two events have in common. This isn't my favorite song by any stretch. Sorry, Mr. Anka, but I'd argue that, for good or ill, it lays claim to the closest thing we've had to a new national anthem in the last 100 years. And I don't necessarily mean that as a compliment. It's a song that defines American individualism and American exceptionalism. But on a more positive slant, it's a song that will live forever because it makes whoever sings it feels like there's somebody, damn it.
Well said.
Thank you. I should have saved that for the kicker. Well, you know what? Let's screw the factoid teasing. Let's just jump right in. Folks, here's everything you didn't know about My Way, made popular by Frank Sinatra. I call this section Having the Gall, the French origins of My Way.
That's good.
Thank you. I was proud of that. Yeah, thank you. The song My Way has its origins in Heighl's beloved France, where it was a hit in February 1968 under the name Comme d'habitude. Can you say that for me? My French accent's so bad.
Comme d'habitude.
Thank you. Which means as usual. And it was a hit by the French crooner Claude Francois. I'm not familiar, but The Guardian would describe him thus. If it's possible to imagine a surrealistic Gallic Rod Stewart, not that anyone would want to, Francois was it. Our second mention of Rod Stewart in the first 5 minutes of this program.
So deeply unappealing. What? Like, didn't they already have that? Wasn't it old Sex Pest?
Serge Gainsbourg?
Yeah.
I had to pause and figure out which French singer you're talking about.
Yeah, he's not as good of a singer as Rod Stewart, but as far as louche, disgusting men convinced of their own genius go, like, he's got to be up there, right?
I don't think Rod Stewart's convinced of his own genius. I think he's well aware of what he is.
Okay. Interesting take.
Claude Francois would also have a hit with another song that would be reworked in English, this time Feelings by Maurice Albert, which was a huge hit. Though My Way shares the same melody as its Gallic cousin, the words have absolutely nothing in common. Written by Parisian composer Jacques Rivaux, who wrote 3 other songs that day, and Gilles Thibault, the lyrics to Comme d'habitude chronicle a couple whose relationship is disintegrating due to the boredom of everyday life. Hence the title, As Usual. And it's quite the gloomy little number in a uniquely French kind of way. It opens with the line, I get up, I shake you, you don't wake up, as usual. Weird. And it closes with, we will make love as usual, we will fake it as usual. Oh, especially for 1968, too.
Yeah, that's grim.
Brutal. Yeah. Singer Claude Francois received a co-write on the song because he tweaked the lyrics to be more autobiographical, which is a hell of a thing to admit. He'd recently split up with the iconic Yé chanteuse. Yé, is that how you say that? The French pop?
I don't even know. The first I heard of that bullshit was from Mad Men, and then no one's ever talked about it ever since. So.
Oh, sorry. Iconic Yé chanteuse France Gall. France Gall? Their name is redundant.
I just can't wait for this section to be over. Sorry, I don't want to get into a whole thing about but...
Please get into a whole thing about This isn't that long of an episode.
What is the point of it? It's just like lounge music?
It's French pop. It's French pop filtered through lounge, yeah.
All right. Did we need that at the time?
No, but they did. Yeah. It's not about us.
Just so funny.
We had the good music.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so funny that at the height of like the British rock revolution and, soul in America, the French were like, what if we took our already boring music and made it more precious and fanciful?
I mean, I think a lot of European countries in the 60s did that. I mean, Germany had, I think it was called Schlager.
Germany had nothing before. There was a huge blank period between Wagner and Krautrock, and when the Beatles were in Hamburg. Those are the only interesting things that happened in German music.
I mean, yes, you're correct.
Sorry.
But Schlager was like German, It was like just...
That sounds fucking awful.
Yeah, it was. Just in case you think this story can get even more Frenchly melodramatic, Claude Francois died a decade after the release of Comme d'habitude, while changing a light bulb in a bathroom lamp while in his bathtub. That is how the French Rod Stewart died.
That sounds like a Polish joke gone awry. What an embarrassing people. For fuck's sake. Can't rock and roll, electrocute themselves in bathtubs accidentally. Invented yay. What a decrepit culture. Should have shut it down after Camus. That was their high point. It's just been ever since Gerard Depardieu started getting starring roles, it's just been all downhill from there. So, what are we talking about again? David Bowie.
Yeah, yes. I bet you didn't think we were going to get to David Bowie in this episode, did you, folks? In the mid-'60s, it was fairly common for successful European hits to be rewritten with English lyrics and issued in the lucrative US and UK markets. That's the backstory of songs like Seasons in the Sun by Terry Jacks, which was another French song. The Beach Boys almost released that song in the early 70s before deciding to shelve it. Dusty Springfield's torch song, You Don't Have to Say You Love Me, was originally an operatic Italian pop song. Beyond the Sea, made popular by Bobby Darin, was a French song called La Mer by Charles Trenet. It's Now or Never, made popular, for me at least, by Elvis Presley, was an Italian standard called O Solo Mio. Pretty famous song.
Yeah. So is La Mer, though. I mean, that's Across the Sea by Bobby Darin.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned it.
Oh, yeah, you did say that. Sorry.
Disassociate because I spoke about the French for too long?
Yeah, I just went back into a fugue state.
All this to say, it became a fairly common practice for young songwriters under contract to British or American publishers to get commissioned to write English lyrics to these European imports. And one such writer was none other than a young David Bowie. Before Paul Anka reworked Comme d'habitude as My Way for Frank Sinatra, a pre-fame, pre-Space Oddity Bowie was the first to take a shot at it. This was 1967 or early 1968, right around the time he was singing about the Laughing Gnome. So, as you may expect, the results were not spectacular. Bowie himself would dismiss his attempts in a 2002 interview by saying, I wrote this god-awful lyric. God, it was dreadful. But I think he's been a little hard on himself. The lyrics are better than you might expect for a 21-year-old. Bowie's early hero was a man named Anthony Newley, who was a British light entertainment star who's best known to our demographic for co-writing the songs in 1971's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. He's been described as the British equivalent of Stephen Sondheim, which feels generous, but he was also married to Joan Collins, so he has that going for him, which is nice. All this to say, it's not too much of a stretch to see why Bowie would have been drawn to a melody like this. His version was called Even a Fool Learns to Love, and Anthony Newley had a big song called What Kind of Fool Am I? So, as usual, David Bowie's influences are not worn lightly. His lyrics went like this. I'll try to give my approximation to the meter that they would have had in the My Way melody. There was a time, the laughing time, I took my heart to every party. They'd point my way. How are you today? Will you make us laugh? Chase our blues away. Their funny man won't let them down. No, he'd dance and prance and be their clown. That time, the laughing time, when even a fool learns to love. That's tough to sing. Thank you. That's hard to find where those words fit in the melody that I know. There is a demo version of Bowie singing these lyrics, which went unheard until a BBC Arena documentary on My Way in 1978. Fittingly, it was directed by famed UK TV documentarian Alan Yentob, who directed the seminal Bowie doc Cracked Actor for the BBC a few years earlier, which, if you're a Bowie fan, you should definitely check it out. That is when he is at his cokiest. That's the one where he's like paranoid in the back of a limo, thinking that they're being followed in LA and living on milk and peppers and cocaine.
Who among us?
Yes, yeah.
There was a time, the laughing time, he took his blood to every party, they'd point his way. How are you today? Will you make us laugh? Chase our blues away.
Sadly, I don't believe Bowie's version of the proto My Way has been officially released. Ultimately, the world would get a very different version of Comme d'habitude. As Bowie would recall during an interview with the legendary British journalist Michael Parkinson, I wrote some really terrible lyrics. I sent it back and thought, that'll be the last I hear of that. Then I heard the song on the radio and I thought, that's that tune. It must be my song, but hang on, those are different lyrics. And it was Sinatra singing My Way. Bowie was somewhat understandably pissed off by the fact that his lyrics had been elbowed in favor of somebody else's, Paul Anka, we'll discover. He added in the Parkinson interview that the success of Sinatra's version, quote, really made me angry for so long, for about a year. Eventually I thought, I can write something as big as that, and I'll write one that sounds a bit like it. So I did Life on Mars, which was sort of my revenge trip on my way. Bowie acknowledged the influence on the back cover of his 1971 album Hunky Dory, writing inspired by Frankie next to the song's title. Did you know that Life on Mars was inspired by My Way? Yeah, see, I told you. We're going to get to some interesting places in this episode.
Can you imagine Frank singing that song?
There's a part of me that wonders if there was a time when he was like trying to grab on to pop cultural relevance that he would have. There's some truly wild clips of Frank in like a Nehru jacket and love beads with the Fifth Dimension on like some TV special. It is something.
Who made that pairing? What talent booker was that high?
I mean, it kind of worked. Earlier in the decade, he did a TV special with Elvis.
I just imagine every single of those misplaced interactions going like Phil Hartman's impression of him on SNL with Sinead O'Connor, like just being utterly baffled, but still like aggressively in charge and a weird dick. But now, enter Anka. I was trying to think of an Enter Sandman thing, but I realized I don't actually ever say Enter Sandman in that song.
Oh, yeah.
No. Anyway. So, but we missed out to Mr. Paul Anka. Paul Anka, not the semi-low tier brand of Bluetooth accessories and audio things. Anka, singer, songwriter, teen idol, youngest member of the Rat Pack, and personal friend and coworker of Jordan Runtagh.
I hear from him more than my own family.
Anyway, Anka struck it big in the 1950s with songs like Diana, which he wrote when he was 15. Man, that's like a fucking Jackson Browne writing these days. Like 16 or 17 after he'd been heartbroken by like a decade older Nico blowing his mind. Sexually, I do.
Blowing something.
Hey-o! Puppy Love, another one of his songs. Lonely Boys, the deathless TikTok hit Put Your Head on My Shoulder.
Which Paul loves to change to Put Your Legs on My Shoulder to shock me during tapings.
Pause to let that one belly flop. Johnny Carson's Tonight Show theme, which was actually the instrumental version of a song he'd written for Annette Funicello.
And get this. Not for nothing, folks. He also wrote Buddy Holly's last single, It Doesn't Matter Anymore. Did you know that?
I didn't.
I mean, for real, though. Yeah. His own hit songs, the Tonight Show theme, Frankie and Annette songs, and Buddy Holly's last single, and this is pre My Way. The man is an octopus. Tendrils and everything.
The man is an octopus. 8 arms or otherwise. I don't even know where I was going with that. This was all before the Beatles, naturally. Hey, you. Bob Dylan, too.
Well, he didn't have the same chart success, though.
No, but...
There wasn't money to be made from writing your own songs until the Beatles came.
What year was Free Willin'?
I think 63.
Mm-hmm. What year did they come to America?
February 64.
Oh, how about that?
Well, come on. There wasn't hit potential.
What Jordan and I are debating is that essentially the old model of the music industry was that you would have professional songwriters. This is the Tin Pan Alley kind of situation where it was literally a lot of Russian Jews sitting at pianos in New York banging out songs like on an 8-hour shift, which would then be scouted and shipped to whatever crooner or singer of the day was going to sing it, that their label or their agent or whatever deemed was going to be a hit for them. And then this changed with Bob Dylan. Not that I'm a Dylan stan. I'm just arguing for like historical accuracy and not everything being about the damn Beatles. Dylan really revolutionized publishing rights and songwriters singing and writing their own songs. Because it used to be, even if you were a singer and you wrote your own song, it would just immediately get taken away from you. And he and his voice completely revolutionized that. And I would argue the commercial impact came from people covering his songs.
Oh, certainly, yeah, but I think that came later.
We're tabling this. We're going to have it out on this at some other time.
I'm not talking about who's doing it first. I'm talking about who did it in a way that made so much money that everyone was like, oh, we got to do that now.
Oh, okay. Just changing the rules of the debate on me. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Paul was on vacation in southern France, where he spent most of the 60s bouncing between Vegas and Europe. And when he first heard Comme d'habitude on the radio, and as he would say, it was a song, but I felt there was something different in it. Something about the melody of the tune captivated him, and he tracked down the publishers. He got them to sign the adaptation, recording, and publishing rights over to him for $1, an astounding feat of negotiating, as long as the Melody's composers would retain their original share of royalty rights.
I just want to say it's funny because we have to license My Way for the podcast I'm working on. And it's extremely easy to get that song cleared because even though he doesn't own all of it anymore, they're just like, yeah, whatever. Because they're so grateful to him for turning that song into what it's become.
Yeah. This would have been at some point in early 1968. And for a few months, Paul just sat on his new investment, just mulling it over, looking at this little French nest egg in his files. And that is until his buddy Frank Sinatra called him up one night and invited him to dinner.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment.
And now we segue into the history of the Rat Pack. Just the best name for a bunch of filthy rich celebrities. Anka was significantly younger than Frank, something like 26-year difference. They met when Paul Anka started headlining at the Sands Hotel in Vegas when he was just 16 years old. And at the time, that was the home base for the Rat Pack. Frank, and Dean.
You don't like Dean? What's wrong with Dean?
I forgot his last name for a second. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis, and so forth. But they were actually the second generation, the popularized ones. Rat Pack 1.0, as you put it, Rat Pack beta version was led, referred to Humphrey Bogart and his running, drinking, and smoking buddies who would hang out in Vegas. According to a possibly apocryphal story, the term was coined by Bogey's wife, Lauren Bacall, who walked in on Humphrey and his cronies and said, insultingly, "Don't you look like a regular Rat Pack?" I know it smelled crazy in there. It was like pre the rise of commercial deodorants. You're talking about a bunch of chain smoking alcoholics.
Sinatra wore lavender, apparently. Lavender was a scent that he liked very much.
Aw, smells like hand soap. Lauren Bacall would later be linked romantically with Sinatra after Bogart kicked it in 1957. So perhaps she was really the one that we owe the transference of that nickname over to.
He died. He wasn't hanging out. That's the different use of kicked it.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. He died horribly of lung and throat cancer, right?
Yeah.
Seriously, don't smoke. Especially as much as he did.
Unfiltered, whatever the hell.
Sawdust.
Yeah.
Frank, it should be said, never referred to his group as the Rat Pack. Apparently, he called it the Clan, which is so much worse. Now, here's where we get into parsing it, because if you stick something else in front of Clan, it sounds fine. Like the Rat Clan. That's hilarious.
That's cute.
The Rat Family. Just, again, you're just spinning out things that are adorable. The Clan? Ooh.
Yeah.
He did spell it with a C, though. So at least he had the awareness there.
Paul Anka would tell me that after all the shows that they would do, there was like a steam room that all the Rat Pack guys would go to, and they would invite Paul along. And Frank had everybody, they had him made custom robes that he would embroider with the nicknames. Frank gave everybody a nickname. Paul was the kid because he was still like a teenager at this time. I think Frank's was the Pope, I want to say. Dean's was Dago because racism. And Sammy's was Smokey, I think for Smokey the Bear.
Is that racist?
I think so. I assume.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, Sinatra's history with Vegas really began in 1953 when he started singing in the Copa Room at the Sands. The hotel was aptly named. At this point in Vegas history, the town was still a dusty desert outpost. The Sands Hotel was one of the first truly elegant establishments, and Frank, who would be joined by Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop, listed in descending order of rank, you noted. So Dean Martin, lieutenant, Sammy Davis, secretary, Peter Lawford, assistant to the secretary, and Joey Bishop, intern?
Yeah. The only cool thing about Joey Bishop is that he gave Regis Philbin his big break. He had a talk show, and then Regis Philbin was like his Ed McMahon, basically.
I don't care about that. This group was largely responsible for bringing a dose of glamour to the town and helping make Las Vegas a tourist destination. Prior to this, hoteliers were struggling to fill their new casino resorts. Now, people flocked to the area for a chance to rub shoulders with Sinatra and co., who were famous for treating the town as their personal playground. You'd see them at casinos, dropping in on each other's performances at lounges up and down the strip. As a result, they were treated like kings by the powers that be in the town, and generally allowed to do whatever they wanted. Sometimes this would result in hilariously diva-esque or Devo-esque, not like the band, but the masculine form of the word diva. The joke is always better when you explain it. For example, one of the maitre d's at the Copa Room, a guy named George Levin, recalled that Sinatra had a phobia of mushrooms. When he discovered some in his dish at the white-gloved Garden Room restaurant, he was displeased. As Levin would later recall, everything was silver at that time, silver plates and silver toppings. Frank lifts the cover up and there are mushrooms. He took the bowl and threw it over his head. I stepped to the side and I started to laugh. Frank gets up and he starts coming after me and I run into the kitchen. He comes after me into the kitchen and says to me, "You want to fight?" I said, "I'm not a fighter. I'm a lover." Were they making eye contact? Anyway, he says, Sinatra broke up. He hugged me. And that was it. Sinatra would ultimately depart the sands for the newly built Caesar's Palace on September 11th, 1967. The lead in the New York Times piece covering his exit read, Frank Sinatra walked out on his contract with the Sands Hotel last night because the management, quote, cut off his credit, a spokesman for the singer said today. You see, the Sands had been sold to Howard Hughes, and old Piss Bottle Howie was not as lax in his attitudes towards Sinatra's casino debts. Truly hilarious nickname. Thank you for putting that in there. You know, Hughes famously died surrounded by, or did he clean up first, or did he died among his
he
piss
didn't
bottles?
Clean up. No, he died with broken hypodermic needles broken off under his skin and was like 76 pounds.
Surrounded by jars of his own piss and long, gross fingernails.
Yeah, long hair and beard, watching the same weird 60s sci-fi movie, Ice Station Zebra, over and over and over again. And yeah.
Again, who among us? Sinatra's rage at this turn of events was swift. According to witnesses, he climbed onto one of the casino tables and began screaming before throwing a chair at the casino boss. The pit boss then responded by punching him in the face. Sinatra left the hotel via the most dramatic and immediate route. He drove a golf cart through a window, and the following day, up Styx to Caesar's Palace.
Very nicely read. I just want to praise you for that. That was extremely well delivered.
Oh, well, thank you.
So that wasn't very cool, but on the flip side...
Or was it?
When you put it that way, it was very cool. but this is very cool, too. Sinatra also put himself on the line to help fight racial segregation in Las Vegas. In the mid-50s, hotel owners knew they had to book black acts because the revenue they brought was enormous. But headliners like Lena Horne and Fats Domino were forbidden from eating in the dining room at the venues where they performed. Instead, they were sequestered in the kitchen or sometimes their dressing room. There's a famous story where Frank saw Nat King Cole eating in his dressing room by himself. Sinatra invited him to be his guest at his table in the whites-only dining room. Summoning a chutzpah that only 50s-era Sinatra could muster, he told the hotel management that if African Americans weren't allowed in the dining room, he would have the entire waitstaff fired. I have no idea whether or not he actually had the authority to do that, but surely no one doubted him. He would also assign some of his bodyguards to follow some of the black acts around, telling them, if anyone looks at them, the black artist funny, break both their legs.
That does rule.
I love a guy who gave money to both the NAACP and the mob. That's nice.
Yeah, he's just he's leveling all sides.
Yeah. Sinatra threatened to end the Rat Pack's popular Summit at the Sands show if Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't allowed to stay at the same hotel with the others. Hotel management gave in to Sinatra's demands, and Sammy was given a suite, helping to pave the way for equal treatment of black entertainers in the city. Well, since we're talking about the Rat Pack and Vegas, we should really close the loop and touch on the mob and JFK. Sinatra met Kennedy through second-tier Rat Packer Peter Lawford, who was married to JFK's sister Patricia Kennedy at the time. Frank contributed Kennedy's campaign theme tune, which was a revamped version of Sammy Cahn's High Hopes. When the 1960 election against Richard Nixon started to look a little too close for comfort, Kennedy patriarch Joe Sr. put in a call to Sinatra and supposedly said, I'm going to ask you a favor. I need your help in Illinois and West Virginia. I want you to talk to the guys you know in the mob to get the unions of both states to vote for Kennedy. Frank had known these guys since he was singing in bootleg saloons in the 30s, but his ties with them had really become cemented when he started working in Las Vegas, because Vegas was where all the mobsters went in the 40s and 50s, because all the illegal stuff they did back east was legal there. Brothels, gambling. Surely there are other things.
Hunting men for sport. I assume.
Yeah. Suddenly, they went from being organized crime kingpins in the East to being legitimate businessmen in Las Vegas. Come on, you guys have seen The Godfather, right? Plus, it was out in the desert where law enforcement and regulations weren't very strict. So it was a good place to kind of dip your toes in legitimate business without having to really be all that strict about it. Anyway, when Joe Kennedy asked for help, Frank put in a call to Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana. Sam liked hanging out with Frank because he liked hanging out with famous people, and Frank liked hanging out with mob guys because it enhanced his bad boy reputation. So it was a perfect match. Sam Giancana had a vested interest in Kennedy owing him a favor, since the FBI were tailing him day and night, and he figured that having a sitting president in his corner would be pretty helpful for calling off the dogs. This backfired when JFK went and appointed his brother Robert as Attorney General. And RFK famously became one of the most fervent anti-mafia crusaders this country has ever seen. The mobsters were apparently furious at these little ungrateful Boston brats who were biting the pinky ring-clad hands that fed them. No? Not even no?
No, that's good. That's
not
good.
even a titter?
Just
Okay.
tread carefully, because this is still this is still a sensitive topic in the community. I have distant family members who spit on the ground whenever RFK is mentioned.
Wow.
I don't. I was making that up.
Well, this is all cited as circumstantial evidence by conspiracy theorists who say that the mob had a hand in killing JFK in November 1963. Another way Frank possibly helped set the wheels in motion for the most infamous assassination in American history is by introducing JFK to his former girlfriend, Judith Campbell. Campbell would go on to become Kennedy's mistress, as well as Sam Giancana's mistress.
Ooh.
This was a relatively open secret in government circles, and the court at Camelot was understandably freaked that the president was sharing a girlfriend with one of the most prominent mob bosses in the country, who his own brother was trying to put away. This is like Breaking Bad, the layers here. I mean, you couldn't even write this. It seems too...
What do you even put it when there's like one of the biggest musicians in the world was like in bed with the mob and the president was fighting the mob and the president was also sleeping with the mob guy's girlfriend? Like, can you imagine that happening now?
That's like a Shakespeare farce. I mean, that's like a...
It's true.
I mean, right?
What would the comparison be like? Who's like a big
some Italian prime minister, Berlusconi.
Well, Berlusconi, just did it for real with porn stars. But who's like a big male star of the? It's got to be some country. It'd be hilarious if it was some country.
It's like Justin Timberlake.
No. It's
we'll finish what you're asking.
Luke Combs. Like if one of was like the most like milquetoast like good old boy country artist, and he was like, trying to pressure Joe Biden, but at the same time he was also like in QAnon, and one of the QAnon women was having sex with Joe Biden. Does that make sense?
Sinatra was a milquetoast, though. I feel like he still had kind of.
But
he
was like mainstream appeal. I mean, like
that's what I'm saying. JT,
his time has passed.
Also at Frank's by 1960.
I'm warning you.
You're just the community's getting mad at me.
You are pushing a lot of my buttons today.
I mean, okay, how is Luke Combs more like Sinatra than JT?
I don't know. He just had that big hit. I was thinking like chart topping.
Okay.
I just think, I don't know. Aren't like all the male stars now like coming from country?
I just heard of this guy Jelly Roll. Have you heard of him?
Jelly Roll Morton.
No, he's a large man with face tattoos.
So is Jelly Roll Morton.
Oh.
No, I don't think he had a face tattoo. No, I don't care to know about that.
Yeah, you wouldn't. It would make you unhappy. FBI chief / garbage human J. Edgar Hoover wrote irate memos to Bobby Kennedy.
While wearing women's underpants.
Probably, yes. The hypocrisy of J. Edgar Hoover. It's a whole other podcast.
Oh, yeah. My funniest niche fact about old Hooves is J. Eddie Hooves, as we call him around the way. Matty Clarwine is this famous like psychedelic album sleeve designer painter from the 60s. He did the cover of Abraxas by Santana. Yeah. And he also did the cover of Live Evil, which is a Miles Davis live album. And on the back half of it is this repulsive frog beast looking thing that's very like obviously psychedelic. And he said his facial model for it was J. Eddie Hooves.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you can totally tell.
Yeah. So that's funny.
That is very funny. So J. Edgar Hoover wrote furious memos to Bobby Kennedy about the fact that his brother was sleeping with a mobster's mole. Is that what you'd call her?
Oh, yeah.
Mobster's girlfriend, yeah. Needless to say, all of this strained the friendship between Sinatra and JFK, and soon relations between them began to sour. But the real split between Frank and JFK came in March 1962, when Kennedy was supposed to visit Sinatra at his home in Palm Springs. Frank was so thrilled about hosting the president that he went all out and had his tennis court turned into a helicopter pad for the president's Marine One chopper to land. But then, at the last minute, Kennedy called and told him that he was going to stay down the street with Bing Crosby instead. Bing Crosby, a well-known Republican who also had mob ties, it's worth noting. Kennedy claimed that this was due to security concerns, but Sinatra knew it was because Bobby Kennedy was putting the muscle on JFK to distance himself from him. And consequently, Sinatra took it as a betrayal. He was so mad that he went into the backyard at night, turned on the lights, and smashed up the helipad with a sledgehammer.
With Vince Guaraldi's Christmas Time is Here playing in the background. Oh, that's so funny. How mad do you have to be to smash up an entire helipad by yourself with a sledgehammer?
I mean, Frank...
a rageful man, to be sure.
Yes.
But like, also a slight one, you know?
I don't think he was at... This is post-Bobby Soxer era. He was like... He had some...
Well, he had some drinking weight on him, but I don't think he was ever like beefy, you know?
Paul was talking the other day. This was great. I mean, just it's so weird that like I talk to this guy fairly and like text with this guy on a fairly regular basis. He was like, yeah, Nat King Cole, he was really grateful to Frank about, you know, all that he did for him, helping integrate, you know, the casinos and stuff and helping fight racism in Vegas. But he didn't really like hanging out with Frank because, and his voice kind of trailed off. And I was like, well, why? He's like, well, it's a tough crowd to hang out with. It was tough to keep up with Frank and those guys, just drinking wise, joking wise, everything wise, really.
Racially.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was f***ing hell for Sammy, man.
Yeah. Oh my God.
God.
Yeah. So Frank was really heartbroken that JFK blew him off. And making matters worse for him, the mafia still thought he was buddy-buddy with the Kennedys. And so they didn't trust him anymore either. And the real falling out with Frank and the mob came when the Nevada Gaming Commission started to investigate mob-run casinos in 1963, which possibly not coincidentally was the year that JFK was murdered. Giancana blamed this investigation in the mob-run casinos on Sinatra, which was untrue, but he severed their relationship. And mobsters started openly talking about assassinating Sinatra and Dean or poking Sammy Davis's other eye out. He lost an eye in a car accident in the 50s. All of this is charming.
Yeah, that's up. Because you know that was the one that he could have pulled off with zero repercussions. Killing Frank or Dean Martin probably would have gotten some notice from the press, but you would have been able to kill Sammy Davis because of racism. Or blind him, I'll say.
Evidence of all this came to light after the FBI wiretapped Giancana's phones. Frank's FBI file, meanwhile, is nothing to sneeze at either. He was under surveillance since the 40s due to his New Deal politics during the Roosevelt administration. Sinatra has a file that totals some 2,403 pages, some of which include accounts of him as a target of death threats and extortion schemes.
Hell yeah.
So this is a rough time for Frank. Kennedy administration didn't like him. The mobsters didn't like him. He was on his way out musically because the Beatles had kind of supplanted him. By the late 60s, he was having a tough time. And this is why he started to think about retirement. Heigl, take us there.
Retirement.
And you.
A primer.
And what can it do for you?
Around the same time, Sinatra's divorce from 21-year-old Mia Farrow was almost finalized. Was that over Rosemary's Baby?
Yeah, yeah, they were supposed to make a movie together, and Rosemary's Baby shoot ran long, and she refused to leave, and then she was served divorce papers on the set, and if I recall correctly, ran into the open embrace of Roman Polanski.
Blech.
Not the
No.
man you want comforting you.
Yeah, but I do want to say she was on the right side of history there.
Well, yeah.
What movie did he make?
Oh, it was bad.
I was
Oh,
going
what
to say
was
it
it?
has to be called like Running Wild or like,
No, he did a lot of like serious.
I know,
in
Man with the
quotes.
Golden Arm, Manchurian Candidate, et cetera, et cetera.
I think it was called The Detective. This
That's
is
close.
kind of on the nose. Yeah.
So at his wit's end, Sinatra decided he was going to retire from public life. Again, who among us? While in Miami making the thriller Lady in Cement. Yeah, this is the shit I'm talking about. Lady in Cement. Oh, what's it about?
I think Lady Cement referred to murdered mob victims.
No, I get it.
Oh, okay.
Did you not? Did you assume I
don't
didn't?
know. I thought you were thinking about like some Benny Hill like woman who's like, in a bikini running around and accidentally falling into a wheelbarrow of like wet cement. And
I mean, it was Raquel Welch, so can it be both?
True.
So he called Paul Anka to dinner and said, "Kid, we're going to do dinner," and told him, per Anka's recollection, "I'm quitting the business. I'm sick of it. I'm getting the hell out. But I'm doing one more album, and you never wrote me that song." There had been a long-standing and possibly tongue-in-cheek request from Sinatra to Paul to write him a song, but Anka was always too intimidated. He would say, "I couldn't. I was scared to death. I was writing all this teen stuff." In a different interview, he added, "You have to remember as you're growing and maturing and working at your craft, that's not overnight. There's a certain kind of song that you write for your age and your intellect. It comes from learning your craft and maturing as a person. I never would have written the song when I was younger. I wasn't capable." But Sinatra was always talking about aging. He hated getting old. He hated old age. And the song is about being old. You're old, you're vintage. But it bugged me that I couldn't write him a song because I loved him and adored him like all of us did. So I decided that day I was going to do it. The day finally came when Anka was back in his apartment in New York City. It was just after 1 a.m. one stormy city night when Anka sat down at his IBM electric typewriter and began putting words to the French melody that he'd loved so much. He put himself in Frank's shoes and began to write the song he felt Frank would have written. I thought, what would Frank do with this melody if he were a writer? All of a sudden, it just came to me. And now the end is near. I face the final curtain. The lyrics went from being about a dead love affair to a man looking back fondly on a life he'd lived on his own terms. And the mobs. Even the word choice was steeped in Sinatra's own unique dialect. "I used words that I would never use," Anka said. "I ate it up and spit it out. But that's the way he talked. The Rat Pack guys, they like to talk like mob guys." Musically, it was interesting because it has an interval of a sixth, which is an aspiring interval because it likes to resolve to a fifth. It gave the song a stirring, anthemic quality. And for the title, Anka more or less looked to the zeitgeist. He said, "I read a lot of periodicals, and I noticed everything was my this and my that. We were in the me generation, and Frank became the guy for me to use to say that." Anka ultimately finished the song as the sun came up at dawn, and at last he knew he had a song that was worthy of his idol. He called Sinatra, who was at Caesar's Palace in Vegas, having already crashed his golf cart through a window of the sands, and said, "I've got something really special for you." He recorded a demo of the song and flew to Vegas to play it for Sinatra, who immediately replied, "I'm doing it." 2 months later went by before Anka got a call from Frank. He says, "Kid, listen to this," and pushed the phone up to the speaker. I heard My Way playing for the first time, and I started to cry. That's cute.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have tape of Paul talking about writing My Way on a recent episode of our podcast, Our Way. We had Gail King on this week's episode, actually, and the topic came up. And I don't think he'd mind if I splice that in right here. It's just cool. It's rare that we actually get to hear the person who wrote whatever it is we're talking about discussing it. And it's a nice little plug for this show. So here we go. Put a little teaser in for that right here.
Well, I started with those guys, Gail, back in the early 50s. I went to Vegas at 58, and I wound up with the Rat Pack. And there with guys I idolized, Sinatra, Sammy Davis, who was the most talented of everybody, and Dean Martin. And, through those years, I got to know them well, but I was still the kid. These guys were twice my age, but I was working for the mob like they were. And they controlled, and we had our life, and we were having frolicking and having fun. But I'd always wanted to write for Sinatra because he was like the guy. And I was at the Fontainebleau Hotel in the late 60s. He was in town doing a film called Lady in Cement. And with the guys we worked for, it could have been a documentary, you know. But he was very cool. And he called me up and he said, dinner, I want to talk to you. So I went to dinner with him. So we're at dinner, and one thing led to another. He said, "Kid, I'm quitting show business. I've had enough. I'm tired. Rat Pack's over. I'm doing one more
And that's what he
hour."
called you, kid?
We all had nicknames. Sammy had a name. Dean had a name. I was the kid. And we're on our bathrobes because all the fun was in the steam room when our shows were over. We won't go into that. So he at dinner, he said, "I'm quitting, and I'm going to do one more album with Don." And he said, "You never wrote me a song." So I go home to New York. I sit down, and in 5 hours, I finished the lyric of My Way. And I fly out to Vegas the next night. And he said, "Kid, I love it." 2 months later, he called and said, from a studio in L.A., he said, "Kid, listen to this." And he played it over the phone. That's the first time I heard it.
Wow.
And I started crying because my life changed. So did his. It was such a big hit. He stayed for 10 years. So that, to your point, he was retiring, but he stayed 10 more years because the song was huge.
But when you finished that, because that song still holds up. Still, when you finished it, did you know that it was a hit? Did you know that?
I knew it was different and very special.
Different.
You don't, it was a spiritual moment for me. I believe that a lot of creative people are really sensing some kind of spiritualism in creative. And I knew that it was different than everything else I'd ever written. And I was kind of metaphorically writing it with him in mind because I was moved to the fact that he was leaving. So I wrote it as if he were writing, but it just came together and it hit me very, very hard that I knew it was going to be something very special. We all knew.
So, in the history books, it says that Frank Sinatra recorded My Way on December 30th, 1968 at Western Records in L.A., where so many classic 60s pop tunes were cut. It was a favorite haunt of Jordan's beloved Brian Wilson, who worked on, what else, Pet Sounds there. Sinatra was a night owl, as Paul Anka is to this day.
Yeah, guy's up like all night.
But this was a rare afternoon recording session. At roughly 3 p.m., 40 musicians strolled into the studio. If you're interested, Lou Levy took over as pianist for this song when Sinatra regular Bill Miller cut his hand on a shard of glass. Miller did, however, conduct the orchestra for the recording. But here's where it gets weird, he said, not knowing what this story was going to be. There's a story that the recording of My Way was attended by none other than George Guitar Beatle Harrison. Is that his popular nickname? That just came out of my mouth. I'm an idiot. This story comes from his wife, Patty Boyd, who discussed it in both her memoir and in a 2022 photo book, which contains a photo of her, George, and Sinatra at a recording studio control booth. And the caption reads, "While in Los Angeles, George and I were invited to go and meet Frank Sinatra in his recording studio. Thrilled, we were ushered upstairs to the control room where Frank was surrounded by many guys at the mixing desk. We briefly met him before he disappeared downstairs. We then watched as he proceeded to sing My Way with a full orchestra. Wow, it was extraordinary." It doesn't recite quite as well as it reads, although with the full period, no exclamation point. Wow, it was extraordinary.
She's English.
Yeah, right. He listened back to this one take and said, "Okay, that's it, let's go." We pulled into limos to a club. When we got there, George quite rightly thought he would sit next to Frank, but the big guys from the Bronx moved him down the table. And you have firsthand confirmation of this story from Patty.
Yeah, I interviewed her for this book, and she said that she was there the night Frank recorded My Way, but
she lied to your face.
It's true. That's
she's
a
been
bitter
lying.
pill.
She's been lying to all of us this whole goddamn time.
She's never even met George.
How far does this rabbit hole go?
Never met Eric Clapton. Never met any of these people.
So Beatle nerds and Sinatra nerds are probably two of the most archival obsessed sub-fans.
Yeah.
They have receipts and prove that Patty's incorrect. George and Patty were in L.A. in mid-November to, among other things, appear on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour TV show and record with Apple artist Jackie Lomax. Jackie Lomax. Pull out some weird Beatle thing. What's he known for?
He was in a Liverpool band when the Beatles were in their cavern days, and then he was one of the first artists signed to Apple Records, the Beatles record label that they started in 1968. And George Harrison took him under his wing and gave him a song that he'd written called Sour Milk Sea, which is written around the same time that George is writing songs for the White Album. It's like a good song. It deserved to do a lot better. And I want to say it's got some crazy star-packed lineup with Eric Clapton's on it, Nicky Hopkins on it, Ringo's on it, Paul McCartney's on it. A lot of the Wrecking Crew guys like Larry Knechtel and Joe Osborne and Klaus Vorman's on it too. Yeah, it's got like a really stacked lineup, but yeah, didn't really do much.
Thank you, Jordan.
You're welcome.
We need a little audio stinger for when your Beatles is done every episode. Sour Milk Sea is so disgusting.
I know.
Awful turn of phrase. So, having said all that, evidence suggests that George and Patty dropped in on Sinatra on November 12th, 1968, during which time he recorded the songs Little Green Apples, Gentle on My Mind, and By the Time I Get to Phoenix for his album Cycles. Frank's preferred technique was to work live in the studio by standing in the middle of an orchestra, and he often only did 1 or 2 takes. So it is possible that Sinatra performed a version of My Way for the benefit of George and his super hot model wife, or she's spent most of the 60s in a drug-fueled haze. I will say, it probably sucked to be Patty Boyd around Frank Sinatra. He liked blondes.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a weird, angry little man.
He wasn't that little. Ava Gardner wasn't blonde, though.
That's true. I guess I'm thinking of... I mean, he just divorced Mia Farrow. He's like, now I got a long-haired Mia in front of me. Because Mia Farrow cut her hair, famously. Against Frank's wishes or something, possibly?
I thought it was when she was on Peyton Place, and it was almost like a Britney Spears moment where she was like, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of being like, because Peyton Place was like this, like the Dawson's Creek of its day. And she was this teen star, and she was like trying to rebel against that. That's my dim memory of that. I don't know. I wasn't there.
It is also worth noting, to further puncture an elderly legend's recollections of her youth, that Western Studios, where My Way was recorded, is all on one floor and doesn't have an upstairs downstairs. So f you, Patty Boyd. You've had it too easy for too damn long. For holding your feet to the fire.
She just sold all the love notes she got from Eric Clapton and the painting they used for the Layla album cover.
What else does she have?
It makes me sad. Between the George years and the Eric Clapton years, she's got a lot of good stuff. Always makes me sad when these people of a certain age part with their treasures and have these big auctions.
Well, you got to have something when you don't have any talent.
She's a photographer. In a cute coda to the Beatles Sinatra connection, Frank would later record George's Something, calling it one of the best love songs written in 50 or 100 years.
And he also introduced it as my favorite Lennon-McCartney composition.
Yes, which I'm sure annoyed George to no ends, but it must have given him a small amount of satisfaction because Frank had reportedly rejected a song that Paul McCartney had pitched him.
That does rule.
Yeah.
Cut to Paul angrily driving a tugboat, his fists white knuckled as he listens to
but
to
still
Sinatra's
smiling.
recording. Yeah, of course. In his like 80s mullet phase. Ooh, I'm just so angry right now. Woo.
That's a very good Paul.
Thank you.
I'm very impressed. And you know, I would know, and I would tell you.
You would.
I am. No. So the song that Paul pitched him was called Suicide, which is somehow worse than Sour Milk Sea for a title.
Talk about him overcorrecting, trying to fix his image as the lame Beatle.
No, it gets worse. He wrote the song as a teenager back in Liverpool as a tongue-in-cheek Sinatra parody. Because remember, one of the first songs that Paul ever wrote was When I'm 64. This is the era when he was trying to make a go of writing, like, music hall songs. So when the man himself came calling, Paul had no problem sending one of the greatest interpreters of popular song a joke tune that he'd written as a 14-year-old. This is one of the ways that Paul McCartney and Paul Anka are different. Paul Anka had the wherewithal to be afraid when Sinatra asked him for a song. Paul was like, oh yeah, it was this thing I wrote when I was 14.
Look at this teenage bullshit I wrote to make fun of you.
McCartney has told this story many times over the years, often in the most avuncular Paul McCartney-esque way possible. Here's one incarnation of that. I was once rung up by the great Frank Sinatra himself. I was in the studio and a phone call came in. I goes, hello, Frank. And he said, have you got a song? I've heard about you, all that. I said, I've got just the song. I'll send it right over. I secretly hoped as a songwriter that he'd ask, so I had one ready. But he turned it down. I think it was something to do with the fact that it was called Suicide. A fragment of this song can be heard on Paul's debut solo album, 1970's McCartney. I think it's at the end of a song called Glasses, which is just like a musical tone poem piece where he's just playing glasses filled with water, and it cuts into that, segues into that. Yeah. Interestingly, George Harrison claims that his song Isn't It a Pity, a standout album cut from his epic 1970 triple disc All Things Must Pass, was also offered to Sinatra at some point before he recorded it. But apparently that didn't come together. See what I did there? Either.
Frank Sinatra doing Isn't It a Pity would be hilarious. Isn't it a shame, Jack?
And yet, there's a Sinatra connection with a third member of the Fab Four, Ringo Starr. Ringo's wife, Maureen, was a huge fan of Sinatra, and for her 22nd birthday in 1968, he somehow got Sinatra to record a special version of The Lady's a Tramp, retitled Maureen's a Champ. I'll allow it. They roped in Sinatra's longtime lyricist Sammy Cahn to pen lines like, this is pretty good. She married Ringo, and she could have had Paul. That's why the lady's a champ. That's pretty good. And though we've not met, I'm convinced she's a gem. I'm just FS, but to me she's Big M. Mainly because she prefers me to them. That's why the lady's a champ. That's pretty good. That's pretty funny. Sammy Cahn, man. And this gift for Ringo's wife was actually the very first record pressed for the Beatles record label, Apple, giving it the catalog number Apple I, making it one of the rarest records on the planet and worth God knows how much. And you can hear it online. A very kind of low quality version of it is circulating online, which I think I can splice in here without getting in trouble with copyrights. Oh, I forgot. One thing that you'll enjoy as a comic book fan. When Paul presented Sinatra with Suicide, he commissioned a Marvel comic book artist named Bob Larkin.
No.
To do a watercolor portrait of Paul dressed like Frank in a fedora, standing next to Frank in a fedora. I'm going to send it to you right now because I want your live reaction to this. And Paul McCartney is my favorite human on the planet, but it's pretty cringe.
Oh my God. I like how he deliberately gave him an ill-fitting hat.
Yeah.
Like a too small fedora to make him look like even more of a tool. Classic.
So imagine Sinatra not only turning down a Beatles song, but turning down a Beatles song after he presented him with a portrait of the two of them standing together.
That is cringe as hell. God,
I kind of love it, though.
He's so thirsty.
I know. Even the look at his face in this picture is so earnest and eager. I love it.
Like a kid playing dress up with his dad.
The candy cigarette. All right, this concludes our Beatles section of this episode.
As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages.
My Way entered the Billboard charts in the last week of March 1969 at number 69. There you go. Making it the highest new entry that week. Making it the highest new entry that week. 6 weeks later, it reached its peak at only number 27.
Nice.
Lower than Sinatra's previous top 40 single, Cycles. This is surprising given a song of that stature, but it's in good company, however. Other beloved classics that missed the Hot 100 entirely include Robin's Dancing on My Own,
A crime.
Garth Brooks' Friends in Low Places,
Eh.
Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers' American Girl, David Bowie's Heroes, Jeff Buckley's Hallelujah, the Ramones' I Want to Be Sedated, Billy Joel's New York State of Mind, Dean Martin's Ain't That a Kick in the Head, Elvis Costello's Allison, Coldplay's The Scientist, Grace Jones' Pull Up to the Bumper, the Postal Service's Such Great Heights, Weezer's Island in the Sun, and George Thorogood and the Destroyers' Bad to the Bone. All of those missed the Hot 100 entirely.
Kind of amazing to mention Grace Jones and George Thorogood in the same breath. Especially because her song
They
is
all
about...
deserved better.
Yeah, well...
What's it about?
Pull Up to the Bumper?
Yeah, isn't it about like going to a car wash?
Yes, Jordan. You sweet child.
Going to a parking garage. My Way didn't fit with the spirit of 1969 in the United States. Cue All Along the Watchtower or Fortunate Son here. But it fared slightly better in the UK, where it peaked at number 5 and re-entered the charts 6 times between 1970 and 1971. All told, it spent, by my count, 75 weeks in the UK top 40, which was a record until it was broken by Wham's Last Christmas in 1984, Fairy Tale of New York by the Pogues and Christy McCall in 1987, and All I Want for Christmas Is You in 1994. But
Nice.
To this day, it holds 4th place on the list of songs that have the most weeks on the top 40 in the UK. And it's the only non-Christmas one, so I think it's the only one that earned it, so it should really be number 1. That's pretty wild, the number of weeks that song spent in the top 40.
Yeah.
In the United States, My Way would be Sinatra's last top 40 hit until 1980 when he returned with New York, New York. But that didn't stop Frank from kind of growing to hate My Way after a while. He performed the tune at his farewell concert along with 10 other songs that he felt summed up his life, which I'm sure was a very high honor for Paul Anka. But then Sinatra decided 2 years later to come out of retirement. And his return to the stage meant that audiences would come to expect what had become his signature song, and Sinatra started to resent it. Introducing My Way at a 1984 concert at Carnegie Hall, he told the audience, "We have a song we haven't done in a long time, and we're going to drop it in here right now. I think we did it for about 10 years, and it got to be a real pain in the you-know-where." During a gig at London's Albert Hall that same year, he muttered under the instrumental outro, "I can't stand this song myself." Music critic Will Friedwald explained, or over-intellectualized, the precise reasons why the bombast of My Way might have bothered Frank in a piece for NPR called A Toast to My Way, America's Anthem of Self-Determination. He says, "It's this song that really inflates Frank and inflates his persona to stadium-sized proportions, whereas Sinatra's trademark, his patented approach, the thing that people liked most about Sinatra before My Way, was the intimacy. The idea that this is a guy who's experienced life and love the same way as we have." That's kind of the ethos of crooning, really, that kind of intimacy, that closeness. And My Way's not really a crooner song.
No.
No, it's a belter. It's a torch song. No, it's a barn burner. What's the old showbizy term for what My Way is?
A dud? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it is funny when you put it like that. It's like he's got this, huge sensitive, soft-spoken side, allegedly. Some of his records would have you believe.
When he's not driving golf carts through windows.
And belting about his life of personal triumphs.
Sinatra's youngest daughter, Tina, conveyed the two diametrically opposed but equally true views of the song in 2 separate interviews. Talking to NPR, she recalled the first time she ever heard her father sing My Way. "You could feel the energy, electricity in the room. That song became his that first night. I think it was a song waiting for him to happen." While all that's true, she said in a 2000 interview with the BBC show Hard Talk, he, Sinatra, always thought the song was self-serving and self-indulgent. He didn't like it. That song stuck and he couldn't get it off his shoe. Frank Sinatra Enterprises Vice President Charles Pagone, meanwhile, soft-pedaled Frank's feelings on My Way in an interview with Songfacts.com. "I don't think he hated it as much as he disliked it," he said. I don't think he hated any of those songs. I just think he probably may have gotten tired of people yelling for it and of singing it. It's a fan favorite, but I wouldn't say it's a Sinatra favorite. Sorry, Paul.
Man, Frank Sinatra would have loved the TikTok generation at his concerts. Can you say hi to my mom? Punched. Like beats a 15-year-old girl. So it might not have been a favorite of Old Blue Eyes, but it was certainly a favorite of many other singers. The list of artists to record My Way include Aretha Franklin, Tom Jones, Dionne Warwick, and Andy Williams. Elvis Presley began performing the song in concert during the mid-70s, despite Anka's suggestions that the song didn't suit him. It was included in the setlist for his famous Aloha from Hawaii satellite concerts, where it was a cute callback to the 1960 Timex TV special Welcome Home Elvis, which featured Sinatra and Elvis duetting on a medley of Love Me Tender and Witchcraft. Each man does the other one's songs, and it's kind of cute, despite some of the mean things that Frank had said about rock and roll as a genre in the past. After Elvis's death in 1977, a live version of My Way was released as a single, going to number 22 in the US, or higher than Frank's original, which probably chapped his ass a bit.
Yeah.
Presley's version is featured in the climax of the 2000 film 3,000 Miles to Graceland, in which Paul Anka has a cameo as a casino boss who hates Elvis. Anka would say that his view of Elvis's cover has softened in the wake of his death, and now he hears it as a sort of eulogy. The Gypsy Kings recorded a Spanish-language rendition of the song called A Mi Manera, and Jay-Z interpolated Paul Anka's version of his track I Did It My Way. But, without a doubt, and in the popular consciousness, I like to believe the most famous cover version of the song is the version recorded in 1979 by the Sex Pistols for the Julian Temple mockumentary, The Great Rock and Roll Swindle.
I've never seen that.
Not good.
Oh, not good? Oh, I don't even know what it's about.
I mean, there are people who would say it. I don't know. The Sex Pistols were like a joke band, like really. They literally would not let Sid play bass live, so you were just hearing like cacophonous drums and really loud guitar half the time. And I read a book, it's called 12 Days in America when I was like 15 that kind of soured me on them in particular because they were like touring through America and it was just wildly obvious to anyone that Sid was falling apart, literally dying. And they were just so pissed off about the whole thing. And you know, American audiences were really to them, and they only had one American tour, but that was the show that culminated in them in San Francisco when Johnny Rotten took to the stage and just said, ever get the feeling you've been cheated after like 3 songs and walked off?
Well, and he wasn't a part of this documentary, right?
Yeah.
My favorite fact about Sid Vicious is that his favorite food was Chinese food because he said it made pretty colors when he threw up. I bet you didn't think you'd hear that from me, did you?
No, I didn't. But Sid Vicious, the famously doomed bass player who would achieve a measure of what am I looking for? A measure of
infamy?
Yeah, but infamy, but also like doomed romance when Alex Cox put out Sid and Nancy and sort of romanticized their disgusting codependent drug-fueled relationship, which ended in murder, by the way. So anyway, where was I going with that? Listen to The Clash. My favorite thing about Sid Vicious is that I think Freddie Mercury might have been bullshitting when he said this, but he was like, yeah, I met one of them at a party once and I called Sid Vicious Simon Ferocious and he didn't like that very much.
Oh yeah, that's incredible.
Simon Ferocious. You must be Simon Ferocious, darling.
Arguably a better name.
Yeah. The lyrics were changed by Sid and his girlfriend Nancy Spungen to include numerous obscenities that were not, you would have a hard time believing perhaps, in Anka's original. Vicious took a dig at his ex-bandmate Johnny Rotten by referring to a Pratt who wears hats. Because Johnny Rotten wore hats and was kind of a dick. On one hand, their version of My Way could be viewed as a mocking bit of punk performance art, a la their version of God Save the Queen. But on the other hand, the ethos of the song has a remarkable core of punk rock chutzpah, let's call it. The song appeared on the Sex Pistols album, The Great Rock and Roll Swindle, which was issued after 2 members of the band died. It was the film came out 2 years after their breakups, and then the album dragged on after Rotten had already left, and then Vicious died. So the song's obviously, his version of the song obviously drew criticism from all the right places. Sid died of a heroin overdose when he was in or had just been released on bail for killing Nancy, I think. Dorothy Squires, a Welsh singer who features in the film, and she'd had a UK hit with the song herself, was quoted as saying, "Vicious should be crucified. He should have been crucified before he crucified that song." But, hearing from quite a different source, Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, had nothing but nice things to say about in his memoir, The Secret Life of a Satanist. Arguably the greatest fan of this version of My Way will, folks, if you can believe it, Leonard Cohen, who spoke eloquently of it. He said, "I never liked the song except when Sid Vicious did it. Sung straight, it somehow deprives the appetite of a certain taste we'd like to have on our lips. When Sid Vicious did it, he provided that other side to the song. The certainty, the self-congratulation, the daily heroism of Sinatra's version is completely exploded by this desperate, mad, humorous voice. I can't go round in a raincoat and fedora looking over my life saying, I did it my way. Well, for 10 minutes in some American bar, over a gin and tonic, you might be able to get away with it. But Sid Vicious's rendition takes in everybody. Everybody is messed up like that. Everybody is the mad hero of his own drama. It explodes the whole culture this self-presentation can take place in. So it completes the song for me. That rules.
Yeah.
Trust Leonard
really
Cohen
good.
to make the Sex Pistols sound deep. Paul Anka, perhaps unsurprisingly, never heard the Sex Pistols version until Martin Scorsese came his way. Oh, Jordan. Until old Marty Brown Eyes, Martin Scorsese. Is he have brown eyes? I assume.
Spiritually, he does. Yeah.
Let's look up Martin Scorsese.
He's Italian. You ever met an Italian with blue eyes?
Yeah.
Oh, Frank.
Well, yeah, but his family was probably from the north because that's where all the
Yeah.
vampires come from.
That's not a real Italian.
Yeah, Martin's got beautiful brown eyes. You just get lost in them. We're talking about Martin Scorsese got in touch with Paul Anka to secure the rights for My Way for the closing credits of Goodfellas, the Sid Vicious version. Anka tells the story of Marty giving him a call asking permission, and Anka says, I said, great, who's doing it? He said, the Sex Pistols. I said, who? He said, Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols. I'm not the front of that line, you know? I'm buried under music. I said, I don't know who the hell that is. So he sent it to me. I was jolted. I said no, to be honest. Then I started thinking, who am I to tear down somebody's right in terms of interpreting a song that meant a lot to them? And I did my homework. The guy went to Paris, got a jazz band. They pulled amps apart to get the sound. I said, this guy is sincere about it. It's the only way he can present it. I called Marty back and told him, do it. I don't care. It's music. It's art. Art has no time. You put it in the hands of someone that believes in it. That's just what music is about, to get it out there honestly. That's a great take from Paul.
That's very Paul. That's exactly how he is. He's a cool guy.
I want to use the term, I need to start using the phrase, I'm not the front of that line to talk about things I'm not into.
He has so many great turns of phrase.
Yeah. I'm not at the front of that line. Anka remains very particular about how the song gets used, though. Frank's version was included in a 2006 episode of The Sopranos titled Mo and Joe, and also in a 2014 episode of Mad Men called The Strategy, which takes place in 1969. It comes on the radio as ad executive Don Draper, who you may have heard of, stars in the show. You see, it's a play on the phrase ad men, commercial executives of the 1960s whose, well, let's say their lives got a little mad. Sundays on TBS. Right up after Young Sheldon. Yeah, I don't know.
You would like it. All week I've been trying to tell you how much I think you'd like Mad Men, and all week I said, no, it's boring.
Well, you know what I watched last night instead of checking out Mad Men, finally?
What?
Hanzo the Razor, Sword of Vengeance, which is a samurai film from the 70s that is one of the most bad things I've ever seen. As I broke it down earlier, it is 75% stultifyingly dull dialogue about period political drama in the age of daimyos in Japan. About 25% more of gassing up its protagonist's dick. Good 15% of graphic sex scenes shot in like borderline psychedelic ways. Another 5% of truly poorly choreographed samurai fights. And the entire thing is soundtrack to like a 70s funk soundtrack. Incredible movie. Does that insult you? Does that offend you? Yeah. As I mentioned, avoiding one of your beloved pieces of American art to watch just garbage, just trash. How does that make you feel, white boy?
That doesn't sound like trashy.
It was awful. It's a truly awful film. He has this thing where he's like, the police have gotten so corrupt that we've been torturing suspects with interrogation techniques. So I have to understand all of them. So he's been like literally torturing himself, self-mutilating and everything. And in a prolonged scene, he gets out of this an onsen, Japanese spa kind of thing, and places his penis on a sort of wooden stand that clearly has been hand carved with an outline, like an indentation for his cock and balls, and then proceeds to wail on it with a wooden club. This goes on. And we do see his penis in soft focus. And then, like a
when you say soft focus,
and then like a boxer, he then submerges his penis in a bag of rice, which he does by repeatedly it from a standing position. And again, this goes on. This film really lingers. Awful piece of movie. Awful piece of cinema, but truly fascinating. Anyway, I prioritize that over your recommendations, Jordan. He smiles, but it hurts him. I am so mean to you. So mean. What were we talking about? Yeah, so I guess they hear the song on the radio. It's a whole thing with Peggy, who I'm told
just
is
move
also
off
in the
off
show.
it. I don't.
They
no,
dance.
I
They
don't wanna talk about it
dance
anymore.
alone in their office or something. It's about the death of American masculinity.
And the inherent trust in American institutions and the family unit, and yeah, it's a good time.
Okay. The Sex Pistols version has been used in some high-profile productions as well, including a 2010 episode of The Simpsons, so well past its prime Simpsons, and a 2014 episode of Californication. Jordan, I dare you, without Wikipediaing, and I will hear, tell me about Californication.
David Duchovny is a college professor who, I believe, sleeps with a lot of students. That's all I.
Close. I think he's a
I
novelist
think he's a writer.
who became he's screenwriter, and all of his movies all of his books are named after Slayer albums.
How is that close?
I don't know. I wanted to give you one.
That's just very kind. That's uncharacteristically kind for a thing I care not a whit about.
I watched
Thank
like a
you.
season of that show in college because when we got our internet hooked up at our apartment, they were like, and you get free Showtime. I was like, okay. Just watch whatever garbage came on Showtime, and this was one of them. Not a good show. Does have Natasha McElhone in there as David Duchovny's ex-wife, and she's a pretty lady. Not a good series, much like the samurai movie I was just talking about, which again is called Hanzo the Razor. Not to be
Hanzo
confused.
the-
Well, hang on. There's several Hanzo the Razor movies. It's a trilogy. And I am, of course, talking about Hanzo the Razor Sword of Justice. Not Hanzo the Razor the Snare, released the following year, or Hanzo the Razor Who's Got the Gold, released a year after that.
I mean, this is interesting to me because Hanzo the Razor Sword of Justice, the movie you watched, was released on December 30th, 1972, 4 years after the very day that Frank Sinatra went into the studio to record My Way.
See, it all connects.
Yes. It should probably come as no surprise that this anthem for unrepentant individualism has become extremely popular with politicians. For example, My Way was a favorite of former Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic. He often played it in his cell at a loud volume during his trial for
War
checks
crimes.
notes, crimes against humanity in 2002.
Shit.
A ringing endorsement of this song. I wonder if Paul knows that. I hope he's not going to listen to this one. He listened to our Taco Bell one.
Yeah, that was funny.
He wanted to like see what was under my fingernails, so we like listened to shows I worked on. Without like he just Googled me. Like I didn't send him anything, and the thing he listened to was our hour-and-a-half treatise on Taco Bell. And somehow he was like, "This is the guy for me."
I'll work with this guy.
Yeah. On a slightly less genocidal note, although maybe not really, former German Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder. Former German Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder requested My Way for his final send-off or Zapfenstreik in German, prior to the inauguration of Angela Merkel. More than 7 million German television viewers watched tears well up in his eyes as a military band saw him off with a version of My Way.
Embarrassing. Not a serious people. You notice I don't like anyone.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's got to be a country, a culture you like.
Mauritania. Micronesia. Because it's small.
Eritrea. Paul Anka himself has noticed that this song appears to what I'll generously call a certain kind of person. And this category also includes Vladimir Putin. He's an egomaniac, Anka says. When I went to Russia, he's walking me through the museum and giving me caviar out of tubs, loving My Way. You've got every malignant egomaniac loving it. I don't know. It just did what it did. It has a life. It's like your children. In a fluke of editing that is in no way intentional, you hear that, Apple Podcast commenters, Donald Trump chose this song as the first dance at his presidential inauguration. He danced to it with his wife Melania at the Liberty Ball, his second inaugural ball of the evening. 2 days earlier, Nancy Sinatra, Frank's daughter, was asked on Twitter what she thought of Trump using the song. Her reply, just remember the first line of the song. Those of you not familiar, the first line is, and now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. That's ominous.
Was she wrong?
Speaking of the final curtain, let's talk about death, baby. We should really take a look at the morbid streak that runs through My Way. It is, after all, sung from the point of view of a man looking back on his life, presumably at its end. Hence, it's become a very popular song at funerals. In a 2005 survey by Cooperative Funeral Care, this song is at the top of the songs most requested at funerals in the UK. Spokesman Phil Edwards said, "It has that timeless appeal. The words sum up what so many people feel about their lives and how they would like their loved ones to remember them." Nipsey Hussle, as we mentioned, had it played at his funeral, and performance artist Marina Abramović had requested it be played at hers. And Warren Buffett has recorded his own version himself, featuring new lyrics written by his friend Paul Anka. I think I'm allowed to share this. He's recording a hologram version of himself singing the song to be played at his own funeral. I hope I didn't just break some kind of serious NDA. Paul himself is well aware of the song's reputation as a real perspective check on mortality. He says the content of that lyric hit everybody. Back then when I wrote it, I saw we were getting into the me generation. I was only 26. Boys, scientifically, don't become adults until they're 30. But somehow, it hit everybody. People get married to it, get buried to it. Guys write me letters from death row that say they identify with it. I've sung My Way for Putin, for Trump. Narcissism runs rampant, but when it's under control, this is the perfect song in terms of wrapping up one's life. We're all ego-driven. Read enough Freud and you get that. He's a very interesting, well-read, fascinating guy.
Yeah, for sure. Many people play My Way at funerals, but a bunch of people have killed each other over My Way.
Welcome to the segment we like to call the My Way Moitas.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
No, it's not.
No, it is. No, go Google it. It's weird. There's a whole Wikipedia entry for My Way killings, as well as an entire New York Times article from 2010. Within just a decade, it was suspected that at least 12 people were killed in connection to singing Frank's hit song, My Way. The song is a phenomenon in the Philippines, where karaoke is something of a national sport. There are upwards of a dozen karaoke bars in each village, or barangay, as you helpfully note, for all of our people interested in Filipino. They really know how to cook a pig.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. As an article in Esquire Philippines explains, life in the Philippines is hard, especially for the predominant sector of society living under the poverty line. It makes sense that karaoke, which is only about P5 per song,
roughly a dime,
became a sweet escape to forget life's struggles for a while. It also makes sense why they'd be angry at people who inadvertently ruined that sliver of peace. In that country, as is the case with the US, My Way is one of the most popular songs to sing, and versions of the song have been known to provoke fights at karaoke bars, where Naturally, there is quite a lot of drinking going on, and occasionally this violence escalates to death. Some people have been killed for singing out of tune, some people were killed for hogging the microphone, and quite a few were killed for singing the song on repeat for hours at end. Like that one guy who wrote a Vice article about playing The Boys Are Back in Town like 40 times on a jukebox. And John Mulaney talking about doing it with What's New, Pussycat?
Yeah.
There's one thing you can say about this country. No one killed either of them.
Yeah.
As a result, many bars don't even offer it on their playlists. And even if they do, many customers won't dare to sing the song in public without getting a private room so that their off-tune vocals will not inadvertently cause death. A bill in Filipino Congress was proposed to set a curfew on karaoke to lessen alcohol-related deaths or violence. One follows the other. Some critics and sociologists have postulated that the triumphalist bravado of the song, paired with alcohol, makes for a uniquely combustible situation. Butch Albarracin, the owner of a Manila-based singing school, elaborated on this in a 2010 interview with the Huffington Post. The lyrics, as he explained, evoke feelings of pride and arrogance in the singer, as if you're somebody when you're really nobody. It covers up your failures. That's why it leads to fight. In 2007, a 29-year-old man singing My Way was reportedly shot to death by the karaoke bar's bouncer when he accidentally got off rhythm while singing My Way and struggled to get back on track. When he wouldn't stop singing, the guard pulled out a .38 and killed him. 3 years later, in 2010, a chairman of a Tondo village was shot alongside his aide by motorcycle-riding gunmen while singing the song during a Christmas party. The chairman died on the spot, while the aide survived in critical condition. It's said that the killing was possibly politically motivated, but this interpretation is more fun. A man was killed. I'm being very flip. The My Way killing struck again in 2018 when a 60-year-old man was stabbed by his neighbor, who was 28, during a birthday party. According to reports, the senior grabbed the mic from his neighbor just when My Way was about to play. A fistfight ensued, and the younger man stabbed the elder, who was pronounced dead at the hospital. Regrets. They all had a few.
Well, folks, the end is near, and we face the final curtain, but we will end on a quote from that aforementioned NPR piece, A Toast to Our Way. It's from Jason King, a professor at NYU's Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music. He says, you could read My Way as a kind of metaphor for the World War II generation that Frank Sinatra represented, looking back at the 20th century history in this kind of cosmic defiance, saying, look, I did it the way I wanted to do it, and I did it right. I'm looking back at all this history, and I'm okay with it.
I won't be.
I'm okay with this episode.
I'll be on my deathbed still trying to hate.
Trying to hate?
He died doing what he loved, being a hater. Yeah, great song.
It's good. It's good to try, though. It's good to try. It's nice that you're still trying.
Well, you know, you get older, you mellow a bit, so you got to work a little bit harder to put your hating hours in. You just lose the fire you had as a young hater. This has been Too Much Information, folks. I'm Alex Heigl, Jack.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. We'll catch you next time. Too Much Information was a production of iHeartRadio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The show's supervising producer is Michael Alder June.
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl,
with original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more podcasts on iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.